So what I'd like to do is just give a brief introduction to our four panelists and our moderator, and then I'll turn it over to them. Brian Scanlon, who's second from my left, is a partner in McKinsey & Company, the global management consulting firm. He has had a number of jobs and responsibilities with McKinsey, both domestic and international. He's focused especially on advisory services to the financial services community, investments, M&A. He worked in McKinsey's London and Singapore office, where he led the private equity practices. And as I mentioned earlier, he graduated from Villanova in 1994, an MBA from a school up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I won't mention, in 1999. When I first met Brian, I told some of my colleagues here that I'd met a really incredible individual, and they remembered him. They remembered him from class, and they said he was one of the sharpest, smartest guys that they had here. So we're really delighted to have him back. And I should mention that Brian also serves on the Center for Global Leadership Advisory Council, for which I am faculty director. Paula Sutter, who's there in the middle. I did not know Paula before last evening, but I got to know her a little bit. She's president of Diane von Furtstenburg. By the way, the full bios of all these individuals are in your packets. Paula is credited with relaunching and rebuilding the DVF brand globally. She expanded it into the global luxury lifestyle brand it is today. She's worked on Madison Avenue for a number of different organizations and fashion houses, including Donna Karan, DKNY. Paula is a 1989 graduate of the Villanova School of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and really a dynamo. I was very impressed last evening, Paula, with what you had to say about fashion, which clearly I know very little about, but I was very keen to learn more about it, but also more broadly about some of the major global economic trends that we're facing, and I'm delighted to have you here and to learn more from you. Tom Quindlen, who's on my far left, your far right, is a GE company officer and president and CEO of GE Capital Corporate Finance, where he focuses on asset-based cash flow and structured loans and leases for mid-sized companies. He's spent his entire career with GE in a number of very responsible positions, again, both domestic and international. And I should mention that one of the things that I like, being kind of the global guru here at VSB, is every one of our panelists has had extensive international experience, including our moderator here. I should also mention with regard to GE that I myself have been a beneficiary of our partnership with GE, because I hold the Herbert Ramrath Chair in International Business, and Herb Ramrath was a longtime GE executive. He retired as head of GE Plastics Asia, and he's a super guy, and I've learned a lot from him. He's been a great mentor to me. Chris Ryan, who's next to Tom here, is the Global Business Leader for Industrial Dry Filtration at WLR Gore and Associates in Newark, Delaware. Chris has worked with Gore in a number of different capacities, again, domestically and international. He also spent time with P&G and Cargill earlier in his career. He's a graduate of the College of Engineering, and he received an MBA from a school I won't mention in Chicago, Illinois, so we'll just leave that to the side. I was telling Chris last evening that I'm very familiar with Gore products because when I was a kid growing up in upstate New York, we didn't have a lot to do, kind of a remote area. We used to do a lot of hiking and camping, even in the winter. And so when Gore products came out, they didn't make camping in the winter pleasant, but they made it less unpleasant. I don't know what we were thinking, but we're happy to have you here. So finally, I want to introduce our moderator, Jeff Goldfarb, to my immediate left. Jeff is deputy editor at Breaking Views, the financial commentary arm of Reuters. Jeff focuses on Wall Street, private equity, M&A, media and entertainment. He also has spent some time in Europe and covering the international beat, including international trade. He received his bachelor's degree from George Washington University, coincidentally my PhD alma mater. And I understand, Jeff, that your father is here with us today because you're a local boy, if I'm not mistaken. You grew up in Wynwood, just down the road here, is that right? And your father is Arthur. Where is Arthur here? Thanks for joining us, Arthur. Really glad to have you with us. So, as you see, we have a really incredible panel here. I'm really delighted to have them all. And so at this point, I'd like to ask you to help me welcome Jeff Goldfarb, the moderator, and our four panelists. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and also Father Peter, Dean Maggedy. One quick housekeeping note. You may see me occasionally glancing at my phone. I promise you I am not texting and bored. I am not live tweeting the event. I am merely keeping track of the time to keep us on schedule. Just a quick question for the audience. I'm sort of curious, how many people think they know what collaborate to compete means? Just a quick show of hands. Good. We have a lot to learn here. That's great. I mean, that's part of the reason I want to kind of just kick things off with sort of a broad question to get a sense from each one of you what it means, because I think it means something different probably for each of you and your organizations. And, I just wonder, Tom, why don't you kick us off?
Sure.
And what do you see as the relationship between collaboration and competition?
Well, it was interesting to listen to Father Peter, but in GE, people think about light bulbs, maybe appliances. If any of your appliances aren't working, please don't see me at the break. But we're an aircraft engines business, power generation business, oil and gas business, a lighting business, as I said, a huge financial services company. And we're 150 billion in revenue. We're in 160 countries around the world. To generate $16 billion in earnings, you have to collaborate across our company. And for us, it starts at the top. It starts with our chairman, Jeff Immelt, and the way he drives the behavior of the company and the senior leadership. It started with Jack Welch, who was really a madman on what he called boundaryless behavior. And so it was never about the aircraft engines business or the power business or the GE Plastics business. It was about GE. It was always about the greater good. It was about the bigger brand of GE and how we win as a company. And so with that mentality at the top, and Jeff has continued that, not only collaborating across, you have 188 officers in GE, and all of us, it's interesting, listen again to Father Peter, he talks about friends and colleagues, despite the silos. We've all worked in so many places, these officers of GE. I started in industrial, moved to financial services. So many people have worked in the many different businesses that you're not aligned to one business, but you're aligned to the greater goal of GE winning. And so it's hard if you're friends with the guy that's running aircraft engines, or if I'm friends with the woman who's running the private label credit card business, and she calls and asks me to introduce her to the CEO of Lord & Taylor's. It's hard to say no and stay in your silo when you actually do like the people that you're working with. And it's an interesting, across our company, the top 600 leaders have all been there probably 20 years or more. So we know each other. And that collaboration, it's a little bit easier. But it really starts, Jeff, with the culture that we have in GE where we reward collaboration. And we measure our leaders and our employees on it. We have growth values, things like, we measure people on their expertise in a certain area. We measure them on their external focus and knowledge of the markets that they serve. And we measure them on their inclusiveness or collaboration, both internally and externally. So when you're always talking about it and actually measuring people and holding them accountable to each other, and there's some financial incentives also that don't hurt to keep people focused on the greater goal. In our company, it's really in our DNA, collaboration.
We'll get into a lot of those details hopefully later. Chris, what about at Gore?
So Gore is 9,000 employees, $3.5 billion. So it's a private company. What's really unique about Gore is it's really about creative technologies. That's kind of its slogan. So it's all about building technologies and creating new products in the marketplace. So I sit on the ICE Advisory Council, and that's part of what we talk about in those groups. But what's really unique about Gore, and the founder was a spinoff. He left DuPont, which is more of a hierarchical structure and things like that. Well, I don't think this type of collaboration that we're talking about here really occurs. But he was an engineer, and he found this polymer he really liked, and he started this company in Newark, Delaware, in his basement of his house. But he was ingenious enough to understand the power of collaboration right from the beginning. He said, if I form a new company, I'm going to form it very differently. And so what you find at Gore with 9,000 employees, you find really small teams of people. I mean, you find no more than 200, 250 people in a plant. And the whole reason for this is they really believe in the power of getting to know each other, working, building trust, helping out, and collaborating. And they also believe in kind of the speed, the importance of speed in getting things done in business. And that is really a part of collaborations. So the only other thing I'll add is that I think there was a time where companies would do very many things in-house. And it's really just the opposite as we collaborate with the external forces. I'm trying to do as many things out of house as possible. You really only focus on what you're good at in-house and try to build on that. And everything else, even if it's your parity, we try to push it out and just focus on our core company. So I find our customers relying more and more on us to do more and more. And really, we're building more and more collaborations with the external market face for speed, for access to technology, access to customers, risk sharing, everything like that. So it's a big part of not just competing, but winning where we are right now.
Great, thanks. Paula, what about at DVF? How do collaborating and competing sort of come together?
We're a much smaller company than those two companies, 9,000 employees. And for us, it's internal and external as well. I think for Diane von Furtstenburg and a fashion company or a lifestyle fashion brand, it starts with one vision, and it's usually the creative leader who creates that vision, that DNA of the brand that we all kind of action against. And it's critical in design and in fashion that all the divisions collaborate, because you take this one really brilliant creative idea and then it has to be produced, it has to be sold, it has to be marketed, and it has to get to the consumer in kind of a holistic, complete, compelling way. So every division at Diane von Furtstenburg has to work together for us to get an amazing product to our customer. And then external collaboration is kind of the fun, creative part of design, in that we've been working, once you really establish your DNA, and for us, we're now a global brand and we have a very consistent message to our consumer, then you can really have fun collaborating with other companies, with other fashion designers, with other brands. I don't know if anyone was watching television this morning, but Diane was talking about Google Glass. We had Sergey Brin at the office last year, and we worked together on a fashion show where the models actually wore the Google Glass and took the experience of going down a runway and photographed it, and we sent that imagery through the internet out to the DVF consumer, and it was so much fun. So it's those kind of things that I think are really exciting and kind of move things forward. The other thing that I wanted to mention, because I think it's really important, and you both touched on it, is culture. I really think that collaboration starts from the culture that you have in your company. The belief that you want everyone to do the best that they can do, but you also take pride in the team that you work with. And it is for the greater good. It is about your brand. It's taking pride in your brand. It's being a good person. And I know that sounds crazy because we so rarely talk about that in business, but I am from the liberal arts school. We do talk about, being collaborative, working as a team, and having, a goal that we all work towards. And I think that comes from the management. I think it's the culture that you have in your company. We always talk at Diane, are we on brand? But we know we're on brand because we work so hard to make sure it's fostered in our culture. So I think that's really an important part, I think, of being a good manager and creating a good business.
Brian, at McKinsey, you obviously have a window into a whole host of different companies, and so you're inherently collaborating as well as having clients who compete. Tell us a little bit about what those two things mean within McKinsey.
I guess as I think about collaboration, McKinsey is a client service organization, as you point out, and really what we need to give to our clients is a positive, lasting change in their business. About 20 years ago, you would have said that change was created because we got data that other people couldn't get, or that was hard to get, often very labor intensive to get, and tried to put it together in novel ways. And by the way, in doing so, worked in small teams that had to, by their nature, collaborate. I think as you look over the last 20 or 25 years, the nature of what we do to create that positive change, that impact, has changed dramatically. And I would say now it includes much more about collaborating with our clients to make sure that their capabilities and leadership are there, that the change happens. It's not just about the insight and the data, but it's actually about the change of the people who are working on the projects with us. And then that technology plays an important role in that. And so technology by its nature adds a lot of productivity and insight and other things to the process. But one thing it also enables is a lot of collaboration amongst people who might not physically be present. And what I guess I would say is then, if you look at how McKinsey's changed over the last 20 years on the nature of collaboration, we've gone from I would say a very sort of more insular, sort of big thinking type place where we go get information, to a place that has to be much more engaged with our clients, much more collaborating with them to try to help them build their capabilities, and therefore see that positive change that I was talking about before.
Okay, good. Tom, I want to go back to you because you alluded to it in your opening comments. GE is sort of one of the last remaining like true conglomerates.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more particulars, details about how the finance arm that you're in collaborates with the industrial pieces, and that, because I think a lot of people still see it as, what does plastics have to do? What does airplane engines have to do with credit cards?
Right.
Tell us about how it all comes
Well, it
together.
started, GE Capital was created out of the industrial part of GE trying to sell appliances in the Great Depression. People couldn't afford it, and so we started GE Credit Corporation to help facilitate the sale, really as a true captive finance company, just like IBM Credit serves IBM. And so that's why it started, and then over time it went from that to really an individual profit center for the company. But we have an energy business, an oil and gas industrial business, a power generation business, and we have an energy financial services business, which probably only 20% of what they do supports the industrial parent. We have a healthcare financial services business that helps to finance the equipment that our healthcare business makes, which are MRIs and CAT scanners and whatnot. But it's only 25% of what they do. We have an aviation business, an aviation services, financial services. We lease commercial jets, and they work very closely with our engines business. So there's a lot that happens to support the industrial, but more of GE Capital, Jeff, is now it's more about serving other financial service or delivering other financial services products. Like I alluded to Lord & Taylor. I lend money to Lord & Taylor as an example. We lend money to the middle market, and if there's folks from B of A or Wells Fargo or JP Morgan here, you are very familiar with that as we compete every day and, quite frankly, partner every day with those banks. But we lend money to Lord & Taylor, who's a big retailer, and we also, so that's my business. We provide the working capital, $500 million to Lord & Taylor, where they also have a private label credit card. And we have a huge business that does private label credit cards, Sam's Club, Lowe's, and so now they're doing the Lord & Taylor credit card because Margaret Keane called me up and said, you're in with Lord & Taylor. You're the working capital. Can you help me get a meeting with the CFO? Can you? Now, in our environment, just to get to that collaboration, that is a natural act. It's a natural act for her to pick up the phone and call me. It's a natural act for me to say, absolutely, it's my job. It's part of what I'm measured on as a leader in GE to bring Margaret and give her the opportunity. She's got to go win the business. She's got to have a compelling value prop. She's got to convince Lord & Taylor that her private label credit card program is better than everyone else's, blah, blah, blah. But for the greater good of GE, I'm helping Margaret, I'm collaborating with her to get in, and for the greater good of my customer in that case too, because if we can deliver a value prop for Lord & Taylor in this case, which they find more compelling than somebody else, great. It's a win-win. It's a win for them. It's a win for GE and our shareholders. And those kind of interactions happen in our company every day. So there's a piece of it that supports the industrial, but the greater piece of GE Capital is really just out serving customers across the multiple financial products that we provide.
And how do you encourage that kind of collaboration? Are there financial incentives that work to get people to do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the truth is, of course, there is. I go back to the Welsh days, though. Jack was a very powerful leader inside our company. And, he encouraged it, he rewarded it, but he also made examples of people that didn't behave the values of the company he wanted, boundaryless behavior.
Stick to go with a carrot.
He took them out. And you wouldn't be running a certain business. I mean, if you make your numbers, that's great. If you make your numbers, but you don't live the values of GE, you'll never survive. It's not only about making your numbers. So there is a long-term incentive plan for the top 600 people in the company, 4 metrics that were, revenue, earnings per share, cash flow, and return on total capital. Those 4 metrics over 3 years, we're all working towards together, and we all have a piece to deliver. And so that's great. But I got to tell you, it's I don't get up every day and when I get the call from Margaret in my example and say, I got the long-term incentive plan. I think that if this is the right thing, Paula said it, it's the behavior, it's the culture, I'm wearing the bigger GE hat, this is good for the company, and hopefully good for my customer as well. And it's just how we think about it.
What about the rest of you? How do you encourage, and if you have good examples of specific plans or plans of action that encourage collaboration within your organizations?
Well, I think on some level we embrace Jack Welch's philosophy that it's the whole manager and that it's the responsibility of the management to make sure that you deliver, as you said, but that you're also fostering this culture. And we do. You know, there's compensation, obviously, that is tied into that, but also we're a much smaller organization as well, even though we have offices in Europe and we have offices in Asia. We are a small company, and you know, my message is always, even though as we get bigger, to still remember what it's like to be small and to keep the values of a small company as your company grows and grows. I mean, we have an office in Hong Kong, we have an office in Paris, we have an office in London, we have an office in New York, and we still try and act like a small company. And I think technology allows us to communicate differently and better. But I really do think that we hold our managers accountable to this, that you have to deliver, as you said, but you also have to live up to the core values of your company. And I was saying yesterday, you know, it's funny because I'm a woman and I run a company that's predominantly women in the company, and sometimes I feel like mother. You know, I feel like I have a responsibility to all these young managers to make sure that they get the value. There's a big value in being really talented and being aggressive, but at the same time respecting your team and creating that healthy, positive environment, that collaborative environment. I think it's important.
Brian, what about you? What do you guys do to foster that culture of collaboration?
I mean, McKinsey is an intensely sort of team-based organization, meaning, you know, at its fundamental unit, it's a group of, you know, 3 to 6 consultants working together on a business problem, and that includes the most senior partners all the way down to the person who just walked in the door for their first day. And so that idea about being able to share ideas and debate what's right is sort of inculcated from the very beginning of joining our firm. There's a sort of we call ourselves non-hierarchical, and I think that's true. Sometimes, you know, it may be that there's a partner who has a corner office and the associate doesn't, but it isn't meant to say that we haven't achieved different things. It means that when we come together around a business problem, there is no one person who has the right answer in the room. It's truly about, you know, putting forward the best you can, trying to find the best you can for your client, and in doing so, you know, collaborating, speaking up, and making sure your voice is heard in that process. So there's that element goes back to a lot of what I think is discussed here around the culture created. I would say there's a second piece. As we've always been a very global organization, so we have 1,200 partners around the globe, roughly. And you get elected globally. You don't get elected in a particular office or geography or function. There's a global group that sort of elects partners. And you will not become a McKinsey partner unless you have people from outside of your geography, your industry, and your function having direct and significant exposure to you. And being able to see you in action working on client problems. You also will not be able to become a partner unless you have been shown to be able to work with and collaborate with clients in different geographies, industries, and contexts. And so I think that really sort of, you know, brings a focus on the idea that you need to be able to, you know, bring and collaborate and work with others in many different contexts in order to succeed.
Brian, you'll know this. To all those points, actually, there's a new book. Just came out a couple weeks ago, an unauthorized tale of McKinsey. It's a good read. There's a portion of it that's very applicable to what we're talking about today. I just want to read you this very brief excerpt and get you to respond to it. It goes to the heart of culture and also to recruiting to a certain point, which I think is a huge part of finding the right people that will collaborate. So the book says, you have to be able to bring the McKinsey network along with you. The power of McKinsey in its modern form is the number of people that can be brought into any particular client relationship. You can go to Brazil if you'd like, but you're going to need the rest of McKinsey's global partners on speed dial in order to make the office successful. This is one reason why the firm has found it difficult to make mid-career hires. Not only is there the indoctrination issue, but if you're new to the place at the principal or director level, you're not going to be able to bring the right people into your client relationships. So how do you think about that in terms of, what does that, I mean, so what is...
Started out so positive.
Well, no, but I think it speaks, I mean, it really goes to the heart of the culture and finding the right people, which I think everybody probably struggles with in terms of how do you get the people that are going to engender the culture that this collaborative kind of spirit.
So I'll answer the question in two ways. One about recruiting and one because I think it is an interesting point about people who come into McKinsey mid-career. And by the way, there is not a high success rate for that, as was pointed out in the book. I think a lot of it goes back to what was said. Tom, you were mentioning GE and the 600 people that you know well who lead different parts of GE. And I was a partner in I lived in Singapore and so worked across Asia. And I'll tell you, when you show up in Indonesia and you're saying, let me talk to you about how we improve performance in a coal mine, I was one of 14 partners in Southeast Asia. I knew nothing about coal mines. So I needed to be able to open up my Rolodex of partners I knew and call them and say, hey, would you mind coming down and talking to my client? Because they approached me and they said they want to know about this, and I don't know anything about that. And so there is a sort of point about the collaboration and the culture comes from being there for a long time and having those relationships, which I think is the idea of collaboration over a long period of time. And so you draw those people in, I think, much like GE described the experience there. In terms of recruiting people, we have a very specific recruiting model. And while we look at there are 4 elements to it, but one element is about problem solving. There's which is basically, can you think on your feet and can you think through a business problem and offer solutions? But equally important is one about teamwork and being able to work and show and demonstrate that you're able to work effectively with others. And so it's one of the 4 characteristics that we probe very deeply into when we go to hire people. Because again, if you find someone who's really, really smart, and there's lots of really, really smart people who apply to any of the organizations here, that's just a piece of it. If you bring someone in who is what I would call a brain on a stick, you wind up with somebody who just sits in the corner and thinks they've got the answer. It's a horrible way you'll never succeed at McKinsey with that type of profile. You need to be able to speak up, share your ideas, take criticism, offer constructive feedback and criticism to people, and that's the nature of the organization. And so we look for that very specifically in the recruiting process.
What about you, Chris? How do you think about trying to find the people that are going to do the collaboration that Gore needs?
Yeah, I mean, I will just quickly say that once you're in Gore, if you're not collaborating well, you find out very quickly because there's a really unique system that works there where you're actually ranked once a year by your peers. Whether you're mid-management, senior management, whatever, you're ranked by your peers in terms of your contribution against metrics like the kind of metrics GE has, but you're also ranked in terms of how well you execute the culture, which is really largely about collaboration, helping others, developing others. And things that come into account is how many people are you developing? They have a term in Gore called sponsorship, which is even different from a boss. How many people are coming to you for help, for coaching? How many people are you mentoring? And what has happened to these people under your watch? Are they developing and that kind of thing? And so to really advance the senior leadership, like was mentioned with GE, you have to score well on both. There's just no way. And because of this ranking, it's not one of these rankings where it's done and you don't find out about it. You find out exactly how you're doing. And it can be brutal, but I've seen people really develop and really change, and other folks just aren't going to work out. That's just not their nature. So, but how do you find these people? I think it's really hard. The kind of people that Gore are looking for, they're looking for people who can problem solve like an engineer, who can think like a business leader, and who can be collaborative entrepreneurs. I mean, that's what you're trying to find, and those kind of people are rock stars in our company. So,
okay. Jeff, I was just going to say, listening to all this and thinking about back GE Capital. Started as a small business and grew to be $12 billion in earnings. Huge, huge financial services. But we were probably one of the least collaborative entities inside GE on the way to that growth because we used to compete against each other. So we're talking about the collaboration. It sounds so good and so easy and so right, and yet sometimes it's hard because we're also a company like everyone here, driven, metrics, performance, and sometimes my trying to win a deal might clash with another part of somebody in G Capital who has the same customer. And, we're both hard-charging leaders trying to win business for GE, and you bump up against one another. So it's not always this, jovial, colloquial, it's sometimes it's hard. And you got to make choices, and that's, I think, when the culture takes over and you step back. But just on our run up to get where we were, there was a lot of tough times along the way. And ultimately, with Welsh and now Immelt, the culture has really changed and developed to what I described earlier, but it was hard along the way.
Interesting. Paula, I mean, fashion by its very definition sort of requires you to sort of partner, collaborate with suppliers on the back end, customers on the front end. How do you sort of make all of that work?
Well, I think the customer comes first. That's the priority. We start by believing that what that person has to say has real value, and we kind of work back from there. So we do believe that everything we do is for our customer. And I think you're right. We do have to collaborate with lots of distributors and people who are responsible for getting our brand message out all over the world. But again, I think it goes back to we have a super clear vision. We all stick to that vision. We don't really deviate. We collaborate to ensure that that vision is executed. I also have a funny thing at Diane because we do have a ton of creatives. And they don't really love structure. I sometimes feel like I'm, the police officer of creatives. And I always say that we need a mix of magic and logic. It's really magic and logic. It's the creative people really using the data that my sales team provides, that my marketing team provides. We riff off of each other, and that's, I think, our greatest collaboration. That's what I think is the special sauce at Diane, and really very much the culture that I've created and that Diane has created, which is we support, the creatives have to understand that they need the discipline, they need the data, they need the information, they need the sellers, they need the marketing team, and our goal is to obviously service a customer. Our customer comes first. And then also, I think my very data-driven marketing team and my sales team that walk around analysis, they also need a little of the magic. They have to understand that some of this comes from instinct and trend. And so together, I'm always asking them to collaborate because that's what I think is really the importance of our company, is that balance between magic and logic. And so I'm constantly working towards making sure that's happening at all times.
That's great. I think we're all going to leave here thinking about magic.
Are you? Okay, well,
So
that's good. If I leave you with anything, the secret sauce, the magic and logic. But
Chris, you're in slightly different position because Gore is sort of an intermediary in this, right? You're not really selling to the end user. But so how do you work with customers to kind of to accomplish sort of the same thing that Diane von Furtstenburg is to a certain extent?
So I was told there'd be no math, but I could use a prop. So I brought this along just to maybe give an example. So rather than trying to answer the question, I'll show an example. So if folks don't know, W. Gore makes Gore-Tex. If you haven't heard of Gore-Tex, it's one of the kind of performance outerwear apparel products. And this was just a new concept when I was in that part of the business 7 years ago. It's called Pack Light. This came in a nice little jacket. I just tied rubber bands around it because I've worn this out pretty heavily. But really, the Gore-Tex part is really just the inner liner. And I'm not going to open this up, but just the black inner liner. And that's all that we are, is, to your point, just an intermediary product and a branded intermediary product. And, I think years ago, you just kind of go, here, Mr. Customer, this is the latest and greatest, and this is the best waterproof, breathable product, and Godspeed, and I'm going on vacation, good luck with it. And I think now it's just amazing how much we have to do as an intermediary to kind of compete and stay successful and stay relevant. And I'll just quickly say that all the product development is really based on the final end user. So we have collaborative partners, we have channel partners and things like that. But I would say, at least in our company, if this is an innovation company, we spend 80% of our time on the end consumer. And we will not really even participate in a market unless we can keep that contact and that relevance, because we know that we're eventually going to be lost in that marketplace. So, but what Gore-Tex would do is come up with a concept They would actually, if you were in the plant, in the building, you'd be amazed. We have these gigantic rain rooms. We have these comfort chambers. We have a concept. We come up with a product. The concept is based on spending hundreds of hours with the end user, trying to find their unmet needs. We make a product. We put it through these tests, and we have University of Delaware students doing different things in these different climatic chambers and measuring their physiological and psychological responses. And then you have a product that you know is right. And then you got to work the whole channel. Probably your company is much better at it than ours, but you have to certify and train retail. You've got to go. The new thing we have now is we have these people that we train online, and I'm talking like just in our biggest market segment, 20,000 people in the U.S. who are really influencers. And it's all web-based. And these people are what we call connectors. And they're influencers, they're heavy users, and we get them trained, they get certified, and they earn points towards discounts on our product and things like that. But all this is done really delivered to our customers a solution now. Instead of just saying, here's the product, we're saying, here's the whole thing. As a matter of fact, this was a prototype garment that was used in that whole process. We made about 1,000 of these in that process.
Part of what's amazing, though, is that, as you say, you're just a piece inside, but pretty much everyone knows Gore-Tex.
Yeah.
And so you're multiple sort of manufacturers, multiple brands are using your product, and it's almost like Intel inside, right?
Exactly.
I mean, how did you navigate, or how does Gore continue to navigate that process of, dealing? I mean, there really is a lot of competition, I'm sure, for your product, but your name is sort of rises above in certain cases. I might know Gore-Tex, I might not know that it's REI's jacket. Talk about that and that relationship.
Well, I think what you have to do is stay true to your brand and stay true to the consumer needs, because if you just, like a lot of our competitors will do, you'll just sell the fabric or the product or some other technology, you drift so far from what you're really trying to accomplish with the consumer. So some customers love us. Our intermediate customers, like people like the North Face, Mountain Hardwear, people like that, Marmot. Others, hate us because we say, no, you can't do that, because this is actually what the concept is, and this is what this consumer's expecting. And but that's what you have to do. So you really have to try to control and manage the whole channel as an intermediary. But you have to deliver a lot of value to do that, and you have to deliver a lot of innovation to stay in that position, and that's the challenge. But it's possible, even areas like we're in hunting, we're in soldier, and you're past things like I'm staying warm and I'm staying dry. I'm a soldier out in the field, and there's friendly fire going on. And how can we identify people in the field? Can we help with our technology to identify people in the field? Hunters, things like this. There's a lot more that you can do if you keep trying to understand the unmet needs of the end user. It just keep peeling it, and you will stay on top.
Paul, I want to come back to you because there was just some big news in your industry that really speaks to a kind of a bold experiment in collaborate to compete. Where, help me out here, Mark Jacobs, who's the chief designer at Louis Vuitton and has been for quite a long time,
Yes.
is just yesterday announced he was leaving. But in the process, they're going to sort of create the idea is to create a new public vehicle for his name and brand as he continues to sort of help Louis Vuitton. This has happened a lot, and there is a distinct competition and collaboration going on there. Talk about that and in your industry, and it probably is an interesting experiment that could apply elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I actually think this is interesting. I don't know all of the information on the deal necessarily. I'm sure when I get back I'll hear more. But yes, it's a situation where you have a designer, Marc Jacobs, who originally had a deal with LVMH to be the creative director of LVMH, and at the same time, they bought his business under the Marc Jacobs and Marc by Marc Jacobs label. There has been a lot of energy, I guess would be the word I would use, around fashion brands going public. We know, we watched Ralph Lauren earlier on, and then now Michael Kors, and what John Idol did. John and I worked together at Donna Karan. What he did with Michael Kors was obviously made a lot of news and kind of moved away from the fashion news and kind of became a really important financial story. And I think that there's a lot of excitement around that. And I think that LVMH, what it appears is they're willing to kind of keep their hand in the Marc Jacobs business, but allow him now to kind of straddle both worlds in a sense. So they're going to, help partner him on this IPO, but then he will, they'll have some involvement in his company. But it's interesting. There is a lot of that going on right now. A lot of the bigger European conglomerates are buying American brands. And in this case, we've never seen someone actually quit and continue with their own brand, but still have the parent company, I guess, participate and have that relationship. I mean, that's a very new collaboration for our industry. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
Yeah, I'm not
but
quite
clever.
sure I get how you quit and continue.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but
cool
I
if you can-
I'm sure this
if you can
afternoon when I get back to New York, a lot of people are going to be talking about it, so we might get some insider scoop. But I do think that there's a lot of that going on now. There's a lot of smaller brands being bought by bigger companies, and then they're asking those designers to take on additional roles as additional creative directors. Yeah, it happens to be a very busy industry right now for that. So,
Brian, McKinsey in its history, to a lesser extent, has had certain individuals rise to a level of prominence. I think Tom Peters, is that right? Came out of McKinsey and certainly made a name brand for himself. I don't know if how much of it sort of concurred with his time at McKinsey. I know that around the world you've had folks in the East, Japan, and others who have sort of. How do you manage that kind of particularly in an organization like McKinsey, where McKinsey really is the brand, not any particular individual?
I think we throw them out as yes, and I laugh while I say it, but that's what's happened to all the people that have had that happen over time. Meaning there are people who have great ideas and then they decide that they want to make a name for themselves, Tom Ford or whoever, as opposed to Mark, or Mark Jacobs, as opposed to where they started out. And we watch for that because while it's wonderful to want to have and foster and create partners who have points of view and independence and an ability to work well with their clients, you don't want them to then go off and just think it's all about them. Because again, the power of making lasting change for an organization, for having impact for one of our clients, is about bringing the best to the firm. It's not about just being sort of a person off by yourself, being a big ego. And so we've probably got 6 or 8 or 10 names like that. Some well-known, some not so well-known, some in specific contexts or not, that all have gotten thrown out at different points. Tom Peters was probably one of the first more public of those.
Right.
I also think in brand, when you look at brands in fashion, or any brand for that matter, the brand has to stand on its own. I mean, if you look at Diane Furtstenburg, we're really trying to build brand. She's carving her DNA into the brand. Ralph now, his family is getting more involved in the business, but it's the polo pony, it's the brand. And I think, managers in these organizations really work very hard to make sure that the brand is first. Not that we encourage the synergy between the person and the brand, but at some point the brand has to be hero. And there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that happens, because in the case of, if you take Gucci, everyone was so in love, in essence, with Tom Ford at the time. He was really given a tremendous amount of credit for re-energizing that brand with Domenico Del Sole. And when Tom left, everyone was like, this is the demise of Gucci. Well, no, it's not the demise of Gucci. He contributed tremendously and he brought it to a certain level. And then there's a new designer named Frida Giannini who comes in with new management, but it's Gucci. And, it's a 100-year heritage. They focus on their DNA. They focus on the brand. And it's not to say that one person did less or more. They're all wonderful contributors, but it's brand first. And I think even at Diane Furtstenburg, where we have such an incredible matriarch, she's so public, and she's married to Barry Diller. I mean, there's a lot that comes with being at Diane Furtstenburg, but we always try our hardest to put brand first. The woman is certainly important, but she's now carving her DNA into the brand in a way that it will hopefully live beyond her and her grandchildren and so forth and so on.
Tom, I know you don't necessarily grapple with these kinds of issues quite as much, although I'm sure there are some big egos in your organization. But what, you talked a little bit, and I'd like you to expand on it, about finding the line between competition and collaboration. You talked about the struggle sometimes of trying to balance those two. It feels like also the world has moved to more blending those, and the lines become more blurred. Can you talk a little bit?
Yeah, but I just want to say I completely agree when Paula's talking about the brand. The G brand is the most important thing in our company, and it stands for a lot of things: integrity and honesty and trust. People trust GE and the products we deliver. And the reason that the gentleman who grew GE Capital is no longer with GE Capital, who grew it to the heights, is because he lost sight of that it was all about the GE brand, and he started to think about it was his brand. Jack corrected him on that, and he's no longer with the company. And so, for us, the competition, it's interesting because you know this, Jeff. In my world, I lend money, or we lend money, and if we're going to do a $600 or $700 million deal, we're competing with Bank of America and Wells Fargo and JP Morgan. And as soon as one of us wins the transaction and is designated as the lead horse, then we all start partnering up together in the bank syndicate. And a lot of you who have companies where, where your working capital or one of those banks is, you're familiar with that. So it's a very interesting dynamic because you're beating each other's brains out to get to the finish line. And then once the company decides who they're going to go with, all of a sudden you start to partner with these same people. And partner, you do collaborate, you work together to get the transaction done because you've decided they've won, you've come in second place, but there's still an opportunity for you to play a role in this transaction for a customer. So it's a very interesting, in the lending world, a very interesting dynamic. And then inside the company, we have to make capital allocation decisions. So, and post-crisis, capital is not unlimited in a company like GE and GE Capital. And so we'll be competing, and you have to have a lot of transparency and a lot of good discussion that says, look, at the end of the day, we require certain returns. And as leaders, we all got to acknowledge that. And if my business can deliver a better return, or somebody else's business can deliver a better return for GE shareholders, then that business may win out. And you have to understand, I come back to the greater good of GE and what makes the most sense for our company, customer, and shareholders. And it's not always easy to take, but inside the company, again, with our culture, we all toe the line.
One other aspect I want to talk about, particularly in our technological age, is the idea of physical space, actual physical office space, and physical interaction between people, employees. And I promise you, I do not work for a publisher or get any kind of fees on this, but there is an amazing new book, another new book about Bell Labs, which is this incredible crucible of innovation. A book called The Idea Factory by John Gertner, and this was about a factory. The short excerpt I'm going to read you is about when they were building a brand new facility. They had labs and offices all around the New York, New Jersey area, and this is in the early 40s, late 30s. They were building a brand new facility, and it talks to what they were trying to achieve in actually building their facility. It says the physicists and chemists and mathematicians were not meant to avoid one another, and the research people were not meant to evade the development people. By intention, everyone would be in one another's way. Members of the technical staff would often have both labs and small offices, but these might be in different corridors, making it necessary to walk between the two, and all but assuring a chance encounter or two with colleagues during the commute. By the same token, the long corridor for the wing that would house many of the physics researchers was intentionally made to be 700 feet long. Traveling its length without encountering a number of acquaintances, problems, diversions, and ideas would be almost impossible. Then again, that was the point. So, Gore is really a place of invention too, and I wonder if in this day and age of email and video conferencing, how much thought is given to face-to-face contact, these kinds of, the ability to create these sort of spontaneous interactions.
So I'll answer that question, but I'll start by saying that in terms of a technical geek, last week my 13-year-old son called me old school. So, so I would invite the rest of the panel to weigh in on this one. But I honestly would have to say that all those tools that that we've brought on have been great for productivity, but there's no way to get around face-to-face spaced interaction. I think if you look at a company like Gore or an innovation company, there's a lot of money invested in R&D and a lot of money invested in people. And if you think about different processes people use, but a very common one is called a stage gate process. And if you're not moving the product along, And when you get to development, you start to spend a lot of money. If you really don't have things figured out and that team's not collaborating, that team's not on track, you're going to start spending a lot of money in the wrong direction. And you look at the probability of success and you read different books about what it should be, and you can't win all the time, but you can dramatically influence your probability of success by this kind of proximity, this kind of area. And one of the things we talk about in Gore, and I'm like known for this in the company, and I'm like, what are we killing now? Because there's so many things we could do, and you want to quickly get that team to collaborate face to face and say, which one are we killing? Because let's go to the next one. Let's look at what's next. And you're looking at quick success, and you're also looking for quick kills. I'll just give you one quick example. To the extent we believe that face to face is needed, we're in the fuel cell business. We're one of the leading technology providers in fuel cells for automobiles and things like that. And we had an entity in Japan and we had an entity in the U.S. And we bought out our joint venture partner in Japan. And we moved the whole thing. We consolidated the whole thing. We said, it's not going to work. We tried it, and we said, no way. And we moved a whole bunch of people to Tokyo. We consolidated in Tokyo, moved a whole bunch of people there. And it's just the only way that we feel like we can really be collaborative and efficient and speedy and make good decisions. Just technology is just not helping us. So someone else can have a better experience in that, but we're still kind of old school.
Brian, you've also, McKinsey has grappled, its history, starting as a relatively small firm, has grown immensely. The world is more global, your customers are more global. How do you, obviously technology enables a lot of great things, but how do you, is it enough? Is it overhyped in terms of the kind of collaboration? What are the pitfalls, I guess, of technology versus old school?
I think I would emphasize a lot of what Chris was just describing. There is no substitute for sort of being, physically together when you're talking about new ideas. The heart of, as I might have mentioned before, the heart of our firm is about a small team of 3 to 6 consultants, and they're all in a room. And a lot of those people come from, in many cases, we have sort of a global staffing pool. So it's not, you could have people from all over the world sitting in, a conference room in Kansas. And I guess 2 of the principles, one are around use of space and around collaboration. One is that you will be at your client site in a room together. You won't be sitting in multiple parts of the world sending emails about I just found this and I just found that. We really believe that the best things happen when you are at the client site so you can collaborate with them, but also physically together so that you could be collaborating on the issue that we were hired to solve in a particular place. So that's one. And then the second is, we also have a very, and I think this is a cultural norm as opposed to a rule or otherwise, but we try to bring our consultants back to our home office every Friday. So you might be at a client from Monday through Thursday, but then on Friday you'll come back to wherever your home office is. A little bit hard if you're global, but we try our best. And the reason for that is because then you have a lot of interactions that are, I think as you're describing before, sort of unplanned interactions where people are talking about, hey, I'm looking at this element of product design, and someone else is going to say, well, I'm thinking about marketing, and so then you wind up with a lot of interactions that happen spontaneously in our offices. And I think both are really needed to sort of create the type of innovation that's needed and the type of quality of ideas that's needed to be able to be in the advisory business.
Okay. I've got just one more question, then we'll open it up to the floor to the audience. And feel free, any one of you, to jump in on this subject. I'd love to kind of leave everyone with a sort of a good, tangible example on something. And I wonder if you could tell us about a time when your company faced a situation where you were both collaborating and competing, whether it was with a rival, a supplier, a customer, and how you managed that tension. And any lessons you took away and how it helped you to kind of build and go forward.
Go ahead, Paul.
I had to think for a minute. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is we had a design director who was not necessarily representing the DNA of the brand, and we didn't have Diane and this particular person, they were not on the same page, and we saw our business really changing dramatically, and we were losing customers, we were losing customer share, and in our industry there's a lot of organic gossip that happens, and you start to have this conversation about, is the brand where it was, where it used to be. And I think if I was to, we had to make a hard decision and let this person go, which is never easy, because so first we had to get that agent out of the company, and that was very difficult. But then you had to come together as a company. You had to come together on a design and product side. You had to come together on a marketing side. The sales team, which was really getting beat up, because it's hard to go in front of Saks and Neiman's and Nordstrom and your brands and your Galeries Lafayette and Printemps and keep, fighting the fight. And I think it was a great opportunity to really show the strength of my management team and the strength of our company and our community in saying, okay, we now have to regroup. And we called it the year of course correction, and we looked at it quarterly. What were we going to fix Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4? And I am very, I think as a company, we know how to band together, and we know how to take each piece and then put the piece together so that we can change the course of the company and then provide a real holistic change to where we were going. And I think that was one of our greatest moments as a company, is how we all came together. And you're right, sellers fight among sellers. Who wants to book more? I mean, you have that all day long, and you do want a little of that Darwinism. It does help to keep everyone excited and energized. But this was really an opportunity where we were like, okay, this is where we either all go down together or we all make it to the next level. And I think that was really a fantastic learning experience, especially for some of the younger managers who came into our company when we were like plus 40, every quarter plus 40. So all of a sudden you're like, oh, I love it here. This is such a fun place to work, And then all of a sudden you're down 10, and the delta on that is a big deal. And you have to say, okay, now we're really going to learn what it is. Now we're going to get our game on. And I think that the ones who accepted the challenge and the teams that came together, it's pretty amazing.
That's great.
And now you're plus 17 and things look better and you're course corrected. And I just feel like it was the best learning experience we could have ever given, some of our managers, who hadn't been through that before. Because I don't think you learn that much when it's great to be plus 40 every quarter, by the way. I love that every day of the week. But I'm not necessarily sure that you really learn in these moments where you have to come together and move quickly and make big decisions quickly. And I agree. I think it's hard to kill things. But I think you're absolutely right. Like at some point, you gotta hit it and be done, because it creates so much financial issues, but also negativity in the company. So I think you're absolutely right about that.
Tom, did you have one more example?
Well, I was just going to say, for us, when Jeff became chairman, one of the things, he grew up as a salesperson in the company. Jack was an engineer, Jeff's salesperson, and one of the major changes he made, GE is known for a lot of things, but we were a closed organization, very inwardly looking, and he turned us inside out and had us start sharing and collaborating what we do inside with our customers. And what I mean by that, we call it access to GE. So I serve the middle market. So there's a lot of mid-market manufacturing companies that I lend money to, and I compete with the banks, and they'd love to understand how we do Six Sigma in our industrial businesses. They'd love to understand what our sourcing leaders do to drive commodity pricing down. They'd love to understand how we do energy management at our manufacturing facilities. All these things that are part of GE Industrial that we wouldn't tap into, Jeff turned the company inside out. Now we give our customers access to these best practices that GE, if they want them. We're not sitting there saying, hey, this is the best way to do it or the only way to do it. We say, if you want to learn how we do succession planning at GE, come to the Jack Welch Leadership Center. We'll share it with you. And for customers, they're sitting there going, wait a minute. We send energy auditors into their plants to look at how they can save money and get $600,000 of operating expense. For a manufacturer who's got $20 million of revenue, that's huge. And it's collaborating inside GE with all of these different functions and parts of the company. It was a huge headset change for the company, but in terms of collaborate to compete, it's been unbelievable success for the financial services arm in particular.
That's great. We will take it out to the, did you want to
Just-
jump in?
just
Yeah,
add
please, go ahead,
One
Chris.
thing, and just from a product company point of view, we run into this problem a lot, and a lot of the times it's because we come up with a new product concept in a market we're not in. And so we know it's going to be disruptive, and there's value in the industry. We believe their industry is going to convert over to it. But nobody really wants you to kind of bring this in, but really you don't want to be the final producer. A lot of times we want to be an intermediary. So we're in the point where a lot of times we have to compete in order to generate reasonable collaboration. And I'll just give you one quick example. I got a lot of these going on, but the one that's done was Glide Dental Floss. I don't know how many folks are familiar with Glide Dental Floss, but that was developed by Gore. And we shopped that around to all the big brands out there, and they either just shut us down, or they offer you $1 or something, unreasonable value. So, we really believed in it. All our studies said this was really a winner, and we went to market. We became the #1 brand in dental floss, and this is true with our guitar string business and things like that. But the truth is, through that whole process, we still were always trying to sell that business because we really didn't want to be in that position, and we eventually sold it to P&G, who's made the franchise much more valuable than we ever could have made it. And it was just a tremendous win-win. So, for me, sometimes you got to compete to collaborate, and we do that. And if we believe in our product, we do that.
That's a great example. Excellent. All right, we'll open up to questions now. Obviously, wait, I think, to get a microphone to you. Please tell us who you are, your favorite color, and your hopes and dreams, or just let us know who you are, really.
Morning. My name's Charlie, and I wanted to ask if anybody on the panel had an example or maybe just words of advice how to maintain a collaborative spirit in light of maybe strong disagreement, particularly when the team sizes are maybe just 3 to 6 people, and there may not be a clear organizational structure to just kind of override the decision making.
You work in small groups, right?
I guess I don't know if there's good advice or bad advice. You can let me know in 5 years. But it's but I guess I've found that if you take the initiative to offer your thoughts, and you have something to offer, that you offer it and speak up, and expect that other people will treat that idea with respect and react positively. You should do that, because that generally is what happens. Almost, treat yourself, push yourself forward in team settings like that, to be heard, to have your voice heard, and act as if it is an egalitarian sort of interaction. And if it isn't, I'm sure you'll be told, but nonetheless, you should do it anyway, because I think there is something about having a point of view as a professional that is one of the things that will help you succeed over time.
The only advice I would give on that one is, I completely compliment what Brian's saying, but I would just say, if there is an issue, please make sure you've made your voice clear and you've made it directly with your team, versus trying to work outside the team. There's no space for that at all, and we believe in direct one-on-one interactions at Gore, and usually when you have that, there's a way to work through it within the team. So.
Good. Thanks.
I'm in the software business, and thinking about maybe starting with Paula, but it applies to any product. What are you seeing as far as customer collaboration or opinion maker collaboration, kind of earlier in the process, like up into the design phase, as opposed to once something launches? What type of innovations are you seeing across product lines?
Well, that's an interesting question. I have to think a minute. Well, here's the deal. I don't necessarily agree with too many opinions in the design department. I don't. I feel like what happens is you get a very diluted vision. We are very thoughtful about the needs of our customer. We listen to our customer. We allow our customer to have many opportunities to share I'm sorry, we don't have any men's products, so I'm just going to say this, share her thoughts about, hopefully we will, but right now we don't. To share her thoughts. And we do listen, and we do review that data and give all that data to our merchants, our designers. They're very fluent in what our consumer wants and needs. What I don't love is the idea of all these opinions at the stage where the collection or things are being designed. It becomes very difficult to manage. And I feel like, again, you have a group of people that you trust and are collaborating in their own cell, in their own design, and with all the information that's necessary from the merchants, from the marketing team. We provide them with everything that they need to make a very educated decision. But the creative process, as I said, it's a bit magic and logic, and you don't ever want the logic to overtake the magic. in the design process. But we do listen to our customer. We do allow a lot of opportunities for them to tell us what they want, what they need, where they think we could be doing things better. And that is a lot online. We have an amazing relationship with our customer through social media. We believe in that platform. We believe in our e-com business and our website being pretty much our global store. There are many opportunities for our customer and people to share their ideas, their thoughts, their photographs. Right now, we have this whole campaign where women all over the world are sharing their photographs of them wearing our iconic wrap dress. And some of it starts with, their first date, and some of it starts with their first job offer. And it's really charming. What's coming through is giving us a beautiful sense of how much our brand means to women and empowering women, which is so much about our brand and what our brand stands for. So I do agree in getting that information. But when it comes to that design portion, I think that it can sometimes it can hurt the process a bit.
One over there.
Hi, thanks to the panel for great remarks. Manny Nunez. I'm in the federal government business, so I have an inordinate amount of free time on my hands. So, that said, each of you represents an incredibly strong culture of collaboration. But at the same time, I'm sure each of you have also been in the situation where you've been in a merger or acquisition or perhaps even joint venture is a better example where there isn't an expectation of a wholesale purchase of your company culture, perhaps across geographic boundaries, different parts of the world. How did you deal with, if you have an example, of when your culture of collaboration met the cold front of a different company or different country culture of collaboration?
Yeah, I'll start. When I went to Japan in 1999, we bought a company called Japan Leasing, long-term credit bank. Got into some trouble, and they spun off this, and it was our first foray into Japan. So it was 1999, and I went over to be the sales and marketing leader, and I had 400 salespeople, none of whom spoke English, working for me, and I had translators sitting next to me all day long. It was absolutely 2 of the best years of my career. It was fascinating. But my job was to go over and teach my counterpart, Fuwa-san was his name, Kazunari Fuwa, how to be a GE sales leader and to build the GE culture. And at the same time, learn how to do business in Japan, which was brutal. It was so competitive, so hard. We had cut a very good deal in this acquisition, which was great, but doing new business was incredibly competitive. So the thing that I learned was patience in spades and listening in spades. And this conversation between you and I right now would have taken an hour with the translator. I mean, it was a very, very long day, very, very long days, but a fascinating opportunity to take a great business that we bought, which had a great foundation, very competitive in their space, and try and turn them into, or take the best of the GE culture and inject it while not losing the best of Japan Leasing, it was called. And also, for the first time as a financial services company in this space, learn what we needed to learn at GE about how to do business in this financial market in Japan. It was an absolutely phenomenal opportunity, but patience, listening, and also tweaking a little bit of how you might have done this if you were just acquiring somebody in the United States, obviously. So you really had to think differently and develop what I call global brains, because you realize this is a very, very different world and a very different market and very different issues. So that was one of my challenges.
Brian, you've advised on a lot of M&A transactions. What do you see in that kind of arena and how people make that work?
Well, I think Tom said a lot about it. It really requires that sort of patience and an upfront understanding of the culture of the company that you're either acquiring or being acquired by. That sensitivity has to be there, or else you won't have the value that you hope to have out of the transaction. I was actually thinking about a non-M&A circumstance, which again relies on being the American in Asia, which can be difficult at times. And one of the things that I found in McKinsey is that while we have common principles about how to work, you still have the local culture that exists. So if you show up in Japan, they're still Japanese, and when they socialize and interact with each other, it's going to take a different flavor than it would if you were just Americans dealing in America. And one of the ways that that manifested, and that I had to learn from in that context, was people were much more hierarchical. So I was used to a very egalitarian sort of say what you think, put it out on the table, be outspoken, and that's how we work. And I found that many of my more junior colleagues were very reticent to speak up when I was working in Asia. And it could be, Japan is an extreme example, but it happens, quite frankly, all over Asia. And so that you have to be patient. You have to say, okay, how do I create an environment? What behaviors can I use that will draw people out and make them feel it's okay to take a risk, it's okay to say what you think, and it's okay to take some initiative and do what you want to do? Because what I found when I first arrived was, if I said, do A, they would come back and do A, and you'd realize that they didn't believe A was the right thing to do. They should have done B. They didn't speak up because they didn't know that that was either expected or encouraged or rewarded. And so there was really a lot of learning to do on my part to say, how do I change what I'm doing to get effectiveness out of the group that I was working with?
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Is there another one in the room? In the back.
Good morning, Rich Brennan, Board of Trustees. I just have a quick question. We all recognize you need to collaborate. You can't isolate in order to succeed in this global environment. But I've had the pleasure of working overseas, and I've found that not everybody embraces the spirit of collaboration the same way that we do. And in particular, when I've been in China or in Russia, I've worried about protecting myself from letting the fox into the hen house. So how do you embrace the spirit of collaboration without jeopardizing, quite frankly, your business franchise?
Who's hen here going to talk about foxes?
Yeah. There's a common theme, and I don't know if this will resonate, but a common theme that I think we've heard at different points in this discussion was about culture and about setting a tone and a behavior. And I think that at least in a people business like ours is, or a profession like ours is, that's all you have. And so the thing that we found, and the place where we could make a mistake, is if we grew too fast in a particular geography, because we have a concept of apprenticeship, and once you get the fox, if you will, enters if you grow too fast, and then the new people don't really get the culture or the behaviors expected. And so there was sort of deliberate decisions. I've done a lot of work in the Middle East about how do we ratchet back the growth, even though it's there, because you don't want to have 50 people, of which 10 really get what McKinsey is about, and the other 40 you're kind of hoping work out over a 2 or 3 year period. And so therefore, there is, I think, at least in our context, you look very hard and say, what can I do and what can I do? And in this case, it was about rate of growth, the number of people added. And it was really about saying, I'll have that fox, I'll have values breakdowns, I'll have clients who see this person is out for themselves and not out for their client's best interests if I don't make explicit decisions about how I grow the organization.
We made, Rich, at GE, Jeff decided 6-7 years ago, we're going to be a $10 billion revenue company in China. We have to be in China. You can't ignore China. But the point's, we worry about IP and letting people in, and we have real concerns about security. But we went in there and we leveraged all the GE resources we could, and investment and the government officials. When we started with Jeff, and we put a lot of people in China, and we made some mistakes along the way, and we faltered a little bit, but we continue to learn and found better partners and exited some of the partners we shouldn't have been with. But we stayed committed to the point that you can't ignore China. You have to be in China. We have to grow in China. And we were just okay with falling down a couple times along the way towards the overall success of being a big business in China. And now we're well over 10 billion in revenues there. But it wasn't easy for a lot of the reasons you're worried about.
I just have one more question. A quick show of hands for the audience. How many people now, same question I asked at the beginning, how many people now have a better sense of what collaborate to compete means? Great, excellent. Mission accomplished.